The February wind carved through my jacket like it had a personal grudge. I'd been standing outside the Palazzo Esterno for 20 minutes, waiting for the catering manager to unlock the service entrance, my fingers going numb around the insulated bag that promised lukewarm risotto to some private party on the third floor. Milan didn't care that I was 3 shifts deep into a 72-hour stretch. Milan didn't care about anything except looking beautiful and moving fast. The door finally opened. No apology, just a jerked chin toward the freight elevator. I'd learned not to expect more. Inside, the palazzo transformed. Marble replaced concrete. The air warmed and thickened with something expensive. Lilies, maybe, and furniture polish that cost more than my rent. I followed the service corridor, checked the room number on my phone, and pushed through a concealed door into a private lounge where men in suits worth more than my yearly income stood in loose clusters, speaking in low tones that suggested consequence. I wasn't supposed to be seen. That was the whole point of girls like me. We materialized with food, dissolved into wallpaper, existed only as function. But I felt his attention before I saw him. He stood near the windows, dark suit precise against the winter city lights, and when I moved through the room to set up the portable warming station, his gaze tracked me with the weight of someone used to extracting information from silence. Not leering, cataloging. I focused on arranging the risotto in its serving dish, on making my hands steady. Signorina. His voice came from directly behind me, Italian inflected with something northern, something that suggested borders crossed often and easily. You've been waiting outside. It wasn't a question. I turned, keeping my expression neutral. Up close, he was younger than his bearing suggested, mid-30s maybe, with the kind of face that cameras would love and morticians would find difficult. Clean lines, dark eyes that promised nothing. The entrance was locked, I said in Italian, careful to keep my tone service-friendly. It's fine. It's not. He glanced toward someone I couldn't see. Luca, the service entrance should have been open 30 minutes ago. A man appeared at his shoulder, already typing into his phone. I'll handle it. See that the catering company is compensated for the delay. His attention returned to me, and I felt that cataloging instinct sharpen. You're cold. I'm working. I managed a professional smile, if you'll excuse me. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Then again. Then the ringtone started, the one I'd set for emergencies only, and my stomach dropped. I'm sorry, I said, already pulling it out. I have to. Nana's nurse. I answered in Romansh, the language we'd spoken at home when Italian felt too public, too exposed. What happened? She's stable, but she's asking for you. The doctors want to discuss options. Options? My voice cracked. What kind of options? I think you should come tonight if you can. The room had gone quiet. I realized I'd been speaking louder than I intended, that every man in tailored wool was now watching the delivery girl have a breakdown in a minority language most of them had probably never heard. I switched to Italian, hands shaking. I'll be there in 40 minutes. When I lowered the phone, he was still watching me. Something in his expression had shifted, not softened but recalibrated. Romansh, he said, not a question, a confirmation. I nodded, not trusting my voice. From where? Graubünden, my grandmother. I stopped. He didn't need my story. I should go. In a moment, he gestured to the man beside him. Luca, arrange a car for the signorina, to the hospital. Tell Marco to clear his schedule. I can take the metro. You can, his gaze held mine. But you won't. Consider it compensation for being left in the cold. I should have refused. Should have recognized the shape of obligation being built. But my grandmother was in a hospital across the city, and the metro would take an hour I didn't have, and his offer arrived dressed as kindness. Thank you, I whispered. He nodded once. Your name? Livia. Livia? He said it like he was filing it somewhere important. I'm Dante Corvino. When you've seen to your grandmother, call this number." He produced a card from his inner pocket, matte black with silver text. "I have a proposition that requires your particular skill set." I took the card, felt its expensive weight. "Go," he said quietly. "Your family is waiting." The car was a Mercedes with heated seats and a driver who didn't ask questions. I watched the city blur past and tried not to think about what kind of man made things appear with a gesture. Tried not to wonder what proposition could possibly require a broke delivery girl who spoke a dying language. Tried not to remember the way his cologne had smelled like expensive certainty. The hospital swallowed me into its fluorescent efficiency. Nana looked smaller than I remembered, her skin paper-thin against the sheets. The nurse left us alone, and my grandmother reached for my hand with fingers that felt like bird bones. "You came quickly," she said in Romansh. "A man gave me a car." I tried to smile. "Long story." Ah, something flickered in her expression. "What kind of man?" "The kind who notices things." I squeezed her hand gently. "The doctors want to talk about options." "Options?" she snorted. "They want to talk about hospice, about comfort. I'm 93, mia cara. I've had enough morphine to know when they've run out of miracles." "Nana, listen to me." Her grip tightened. "This man who gave you a car, was his name Corvino?" The room tilted slightly. "How did you?" "His father and your grandfather did business together, a long time ago when borders meant different things." She studied my face. "Be careful with the Corvino family, Livia. They collect debts and favors like other men collect stamps, but they honor their word." "What kind of business?" "The kind that kept us fed during hard times." She closed her eyes. "The kind that binds. If Dante Corvino offers you something, it's because he sees value in you. Just remember, you can negotiate with men like that. They respect clarity." The nurse returned with a doctor who explained, in careful euphemisms, that aggressive treatment had stopped working. That comfort care was the compassionate choice. That we had weeks, maybe less. I signed forms I barely read. When I finally stepped outside, the city had gone full dark. The Mercedes waited at the curb, and I realized with distant surprise that of course it had waited. Men like Dante Corvino thought in logistics, in contingencies. The driver opened the door. "Signor Corvino asked me to take you wherever you need to go." "Home is fine." I gave him my address, watched the familiar streets through glass that probably cost more than my security deposit. When we pulled up to my building, fourth floor walk-up, peeling paint, broken intercom, the driver handed me an envelope. "From Signor Corvino." Inside, €500 and a note in decisive handwriting. "For the catering company's trouble, call me tomorrow. DC." I should have been insulted. Should have seen the presumption, the casual wealth wielded like a net. Instead, I thought about hospice costs, about the gap between my grandmother's dignity and my bank account, about the way he'd said your particular skill, set like it, was something valuable instead of just another marker of how far my family had fallen from wherever we'd started. I climbed the stairs to my apartment and set his card on the kitchen counter where I'd see it in the morning. The city outside my window glittered with promises it never kept. But maybe, just this once, someone was offering a door I could actually walk through. I called the number at 9 the next morning, after a shift at the cafe that ended with espresso grounds under my fingernails and the owner's lecture about being present ringing in my ears. The phone rang twice. "Livia," not a question, he'd been expecting me. "I trust your grandmother is settled." For now, I kept my voice level. "You wanted to talk about a proposition." "I did. I have meetings in the city today, but this conversation should happen in person. Can you meet me at 2? I checked my phone. My next shift started at 5. "Where?" He gave me an address in the financial district, floor 32. "Ask for Luca at reception. He'll bring you up." "What kind of proposition is this?" A pause considering. The kind that solves several problems at once. Yours and mine. We'll discuss terms. I'm not, I stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence without revealing too much. I know what you're not. His voice carried something that might have been amusement. 2 o'clock, Livia, bring questions. He disconnected before I could refuse. The building looked like it ate smaller buildings for breakfast. All glass and steel and security checkpoints that required ID and purpose. I gave my name, and the receptionist's expression shifted into something more attentive. Of course, Signorina Marcello. Luca will be right down. Luca turned out to be the same man from the previous night. Trim suit, efficient movements, the air of someone who fixed problems before they became visible. He escorted me to an elevator that required a keycard, then up to a floor that spoke in the language of serious money. Thick carpet, original art, silence that cost extra. Dante's office occupied a corner with views that stretched to the Alps on clear days. Today, the mountains hid behind winter clouds, but the city sprawled beneath us like a promise he might actually keep. He stood when I entered, gestured to a chair near his desk. Thank you for coming. You made it difficult to refuse. I made it easy to accept. He sat across from me, not behind the desk, a deliberate choice to suggest equality we both knew didn't exist. How much do you know about what I do? I know you own the Palazzo Esterno. I assume you own other things. I facilitate logistics for international clients. Import, export, consultation on complex regulatory environments. He said it like it was true, and maybe parts of it were. My work requires discretion, cultural fluency, and absolute linguistic precision. Yesterday, I had a call from a Russian client who needed immediate clarification on contract terms. My translator was in Dubai. The delay cost me a deal worth 7 figures. I waited. You speak Romansh, Italian, and I'm willing to bet reasonable German and French. My English is functional. Better than functional, or you wouldn't have understood the subtext of what I just said. He leaned forward slightly. I need someone who can move between languages and contexts without creating friction. Someone observant. Someone who understands that silence is sometimes the most important translation. You need a translator. I need an asset. He watched me absorb that word. The position comes with a substantial salary, housing in a building I own, and access to medical specialists. The best oncologists in Europe if your grandmother would accept that care. There it was, the hook dressed as generosity. In exchange for what? Your time, your languages, and your discretion. You'll accompany me to meetings, translate documents, occasionally entertain clients who need cultural context. Standard business assistant work with linguistic specialization. And the non-standard parts. His expression didn't change, but something in the air sharpened. You'll see things you won't discuss. You'll meet people whose names you'll forget. You'll learn that powerful men sometimes solve problems through channels that won't appear in newspapers. He paused. But you'll never be asked to break laws, and you'll never be placed in physical danger. Those are boundaries I don't cross with civilians. Civilians, I tested the word. That's an interesting choice. Accurate choice. He stood, walked to the window. My father built a network that operated in shadows because legitimate channels were closed to immigrants with ambition. I've spent 15 years moving that network into daylight. I own hotels, logistics companies, investment firms. All legal, all taxed, all documented. But the transition requires careful choreography, and some of the old connections resist legitimacy. Why tell me this? He turned. Because you're going to research me tonight. You'll find the rumors, the speculation, the carefully worded articles that suggest without accusing. I'd rather you hear the context from me, so I can make an informed decision. So you can understand the stakes. He returned to his chair. Your grandfather knew my father. They moved money during difficult times, kept families fed when institutions failed. My father remembered that. When I learned you were his granddaughter, working 3 jobs to cover hospice costs, he gestured elegant. It seemed like an opportunity to honor an old debt while solving a current problem. My grandmother said you collect debts and favors. She's not wrong, he smiled, and it looked genuine. But she also said we honor our word. So here's mine. You work for me, your grandmother receives care that will keep her comfortable and aware for whatever time remains. You receive a salary that will let you finish your degree. And when you've decided you want out, a year from now, 5 years from now, you walk away with references that will open any door in Europe. It sounded too good, too easy. What's the real cost? Your naivety. He said it without cruelty. You'll learn how power actually works. You'll see that the world doesn't run on merit or fairness, but on leverage and relationship. You'll become someone who understands that legal and ethical aren't always synonyms, and you won't be able to unknow those things. I thought about my grandmother's paper-thin hands, about the doctor's careful euphemisms, about 3 more years of my degree and a job market that didn't care about broke girls with dead languages. I wanted in writing, salary, benefits, termination terms. Luca will have a contract ready by tomorrow. Dante stood, offered his hand. Do we have an agreement in principle? His palm was warm and dry when I shook it. We do. Good. Plan to start Monday. Luca will arrange the apartment this week, and I'll have my personal physician contact the hospice about your grandmother's transfer to a private facility. That fast? I move quickly when I've made a decision. He walked me to the door. One more thing, Livia, the discretion I mentioned, it starts now. Nothing we discussed leaves this office. Understood. Welcome to the organization, he said, and the word organization carried weight that company wouldn't have held. I left with Luca's card, a check for my first week's advance, and the sensation of having signed something more binding than a contract. The metro ride home felt longer than usual. The apartment Luca showed me on Friday occupied the 4th floor of a restored building near the Naviglio Grand. Exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen with appliances I'd need a manual to operate. It came furnished with pieces that looked both expensive and deliberately understated. Signor Corvino owns the building, Luca explained, handing me a key. You'll have privacy. No one will bother you. This is too much. It's strategic, he said it matter-of-factly. You need to be available on short notice, and you need to present well when meeting clients. This address communicates the right message. I set my single bag on the designer sofa and tried not to calculate how many months of my old rent this space represented. The car will pick you up Monday at 7, Luca continued. Business casual. Signor Corvino has meetings in Lugano, and you'll be traveling with him. Lugano, as in Switzerland. We'll return the same day. Bring your passport. He moved toward the door, then paused. A word of advice if you'll accept it. I nodded. Signor Corvino is exacting but fair. He'll push you, but he won't break you. The clients, Luca's expression shifted. Some of them will test boundaries. Stay professional, stay close to Signor Corvino, and remember that you work for him, not them. He protects his people. His people. You're under his aegis now. That means something in our world. After he left, I explored the apartment with a growing sense of unreality. The bathroom had a soaking tub and toiletries that smelled like they cost triple digits. The bedroom overlooked the canal, evening light turning the water to hammered gold. The closet contained clothes in my size, professional separates, a winter coat that probably cost more than my university tuition. I called my grandmother from the balcony, told her about the apartment and the job and the private facility. He moves fast, she said, and I heard approval in her voice. Too fast. The Corvino family doesn't waste time once they've identified value, she coughed, a wet sound that made my chest ache. Your grandfather used to say that old Corvino could spot leverage 3 moves ahead. Dante has that same instinct. He's positioning you. For what? That depends on what you want, Miyakara. You can be a tool he uses or a partner he respects. The choice is yours, but you have to claim it. I don't know how to operate in his world. Then learn, watch, listen. Remember that men like Dante speak in subtext and gesture. Pay attention to what they don't say. We talked until the nurse came to help her settle for the night. After I disconnected, I stood on the balcony and watched the city darken. Somewhere out there, Dante Corvino was making arrangements, moving pieces, building the architecture of my new life. I should have felt trapped. Instead, I felt chosen. The private jet was smaller than I'd expected. 8 seats, cream leather, a conference table that converted from the armrests with mechanical precision. Dante worked on his laptop while we taxied, speaking occasionally into his phone in rapid Italian laced with French. I sat across from him, reviewing the briefing documents Luca had provided. Financial restructuring for a hotel group operating between Italy and Switzerland. Loan terms that required careful translation between legal systems. Nothing obviously criminal, but I was learning to read between the lines. Questions? Dante asked without looking up. The interest structure seems unusual. Now he looked up. How so? It's calibrated to Swiss banking regulations, but leverages Italian tax treatment. Almost like it's designed to be defensible from both sides if anyone asks questions. Something that might have been approval crossed his face, and if someone did ask questions. Every number has documentary support. You've left yourself room to argue good faith. Exactly, he closed the laptop. You have instinct for this, that's rare. My degree is in international finance. I know. I also know you were working 3 service jobs because the internships that lead to real positions all go to people with family connections. He leaned back. I'm offering you the education you'd get at Goldman Sachs, but with higher stakes and better pay. And more moral ambiguity. Substantially more. He said it without apology, but also more honesty about how the world actually works. Wall Street pretends it's legitimate while engineering the same outcomes I achieve. At least I don't claim moral high ground. The meeting in Lugano took place in a private bank that looked like it stored secrets in its foundation stones. The clients were Swiss-German bankers and Italian hoteliers who needed to move assets across borders without triggering regulatory attention. I translated not just language but context, the cultural subtext that let both sides feel they'd won. Dante watched me work with the focus of someone evaluating an investment. During a break, he guided me to a terrace with views of the lake. You're good at this. I'm bilingual, it's not complicated. You're diplomatic, that's different. He accepted espresso from a server who materialized and vanished like smoke. You let the Swiss banker think he'd cornered the Italians, and you let the Italian think he'd charmed the Swiss. Both of them trust you now. I just translated what they said. You translated what they meant. That's the skill I'm paying for. He studied me over the rim of his cup. How are you finding the transition? Disorienting, I admitted. Last week I was delivering risotto. Today I'm negotiating cross-border financing. You're not negotiating, yet. The word yet hung between us like a promise. But you could be with training. I think you have the temperament for it. Because I'm good at being invisible. Because you see people clearly. He set down his cup. Most people in my world are performing. You watch the performance and understand what's underneath. That makes you dangerous. To you. Potentially, he smiled. Also potentially invaluable. I haven't decided which yet. We flew back as the sun set, the Alps turning purple and gold beneath us. Dante made calls in 3 languages while I reviewed the contracts we'd signed, looking for the gaps where exposure might hide. Find anything? He asked when I finally looked up. The escrow agent is one of your people. He is. So if the deal goes sideways, you control the leverage. I do, he closed his phone. Does that bother you? I'm trying to decide. I met his gaze. You told me you were moving the organization toward legitimacy. I am, but legitimacy doesn't mean stupidity. I've spent 15 years building redundancies and fallback positions because powerful men have short memories about favors and long memories about slights. He leaned forward. The escrow agent protects both parties. If the Swiss banker tries to renegotiate terms after we've delivered, I have leverage. If my people fail to perform, he has recourse. It's fair. It's controlled. Everything is controlled, Livia. The only question is who's doing the controlling. He held my gaze. I'd rather it be me. The car dropped me at the apartment after 10. I found a package waiting inside, a jewelry box with a note in Dante's handwriting. You represented me well today. DC. Inside, pearl earrings that probably cost more than I used to make in a month. I held them up to the light, watched them glow against my palm, and tried to decide if they were a gift or a uniform. My phone buzzed. Dante, they're a gift, no strings, you earned them. I typed back, how did you know I was wondering? His response came immediately, because I wonder the same thing every time someone gives me something. It's an immigrant's instinct. We never quite trust generosity. I put the earrings on and stood in front of the mirror. They changed my face somehow, made me look like someone who belonged in private jets and Swiss banks. Made me look like one of Dante's people. The next morning, a different kind of car arrived. A medical transport van with Dante's personal physician, Dr. Castellano, who had kind eyes and the competence of someone who'd seen everything twice. Signor Corvino asked me to oversee your grandmother's transfer to the private facility, he explained. I'll be managing her comfort care personally. At the hospital, Nana looked smaller and more tired than I'd ever seen her. But when Dr. Castellano introduced himself and began speaking to her in Romanche, fluent, unaccented Romanche, something in her face brightened. You're from the Engadin, she said, not a question. Valmouster, he confirmed. My grandmother and I still speak it at home. They conversed for several minutes while I blinked back tears I hadn't expected. Dante had found a doctor who spoke my grandmother's language. Not Italian she'd learned, not German she'd acquired, but the mountain dialect she'd carried from childhood. He chose me specifically, Dr. Castellano murmured as we rode in the transport van to the private facility. Signor Corvino requested a palliative specialist with Romanche fluency. There are 3 of us in Italy. I'm the one in Milan. He's very thorough. He's very protective of his people, and you're his people now. He smiled gently. That's not a warning, just an observation. The facility occupied a converted villa on the northern edge of the city, gardens that would bloom in spring, rooms that felt like bedrooms instead of cells, staff who moved with quiet efficiency. They settled Nana in a sunny room with views of the hills, and within an hour, she looked more comfortable than she had in weeks. This is too much, I said when we had a moment alone. No, her voice was firm. This is a debt being honored. Your grandfather helped Dante's father during hard times. Now Dante helps us during ours. That's how these relationships work. But I'm working for him. I'm earning this. Are you? She studied me with eyes that had watched empires rise and fall. Or are you being positioned? Livia, I'm not saying Dante's generosity isn't genuine, but men like him don't act without strategy. He's investing in you. The question is what return he expects. He said I can walk away whenever I want. And you probably can, after you've become so valuable that walking away costs you more than staying. She reached for my hand. I'm not telling you to refuse his help. I'm telling you to go into it with clear eyes, negotiate from the beginning, set boundaries, make him respect you as a partner, not a possession. Dr. Castellano returned with medication schedules and care plans, and I realized Dante had thought through logistics I hadn't even considered: 24-hour nursing, dietary accommodations, a priest who visited twice weekly. Every detail handled, every need anticipated. The beautiful chain disguised as care. When I left that evening, I found Dante waiting in the facility's lobby. Not Luca, not a driver, Dante himself, standing by the windows with his hands in his pockets. "I wanted to see how she settled," he said by way of explanation. "She's comfortable, thank you. Dr. Castellano speaks Romanche." "I know," I managed to keep my voice steady. "That was thoughtful. It was strategic." He guided me toward the exit with a hand at the small of my back. The gesture I was learning meant both protection and control. Comfort impacts longevity. If your grandmother feels safe and understood, she'll be present longer, which means you'll be stable and focused, which serves my interests. The honesty should have been insulting. Instead, it felt like respect. "So this is all self-interest?" "No," he opened the car door for me, "but it's not pure altruism either. I don't do things for only one reason, Livia. I'm too efficient for that." We drove through the city in companionable silence. I watched the streets blur past and tried to catalog my feelings: gratitude tangled with wariness, attraction braided through with caution. "Question," he said as we approached my building. "Ask." "Are you afraid of me?" I considered the question seriously. "No." "Should you be?" "I don't think so." I turned to look at him. "You're dangerous, but not to me, not yet. You've invested too much." He smiled then, genuine and unguarded. "You're learning faster than I expected." "Is that good or bad?" "I haven't decided." The car stopped. "We have dinner in 2 days with a German developer. Wear the pearls. He'll interpret them as a signal that you're under my protection." "Am I?" "Absolutely." He said it without hesitation. "You're mine to protect, just as your grandmother is mine to care for and your safety is mine to guarantee. That's what Aegis means." I got out of the car and leaned back in before closing the door. "And what am I to you beyond an asset?" "I'm still deciding that too." His expression was unreadable. "Sleep well, Livia." I watched the car pull away and wondered if I'd just been reassured or warned. The dinner took place in a restaurant that didn't advertise and required 3 weeks' notice for reservations. The German developer, Klaus Richter, arrived with an entourage that made it clear he valued presence over subtlety. I wore the pearls and a black dress from the apartment's mysteriously stocked closet and tried to embody the competence Dante apparently saw in me. Klaus spoke German shaded with Swiss formality and Italian filtered through presumption. He wanted Dante's help navigating Milan's permit system for a luxury residential development. He kept touching my arm when he spoke to me, gestures that Dante tracked with eyes gone flat and dangerous. "Livia is my business associate," Dante said during the second course, his voice pleasant and absolutely final. "Not entertainment." Klaus withdrew his hand like he'd touched heat. "Of course, my apologies." The rest of dinner proceeded with exquisite courtesy and careful translation. I caught the subtext: Klaus testing boundaries, Dante reinforcing them, me being used as the vector for establishing dominance. Later in the car, Dante was quiet for several blocks before speaking. "I apologize for that display." "Which part?" "The part where I had to mark territory like a territorial dog." He sounded disgusted with himself. "You're not property." "But I am yours to protect." "That's different." "Is it?" I watched the city through tinted glass. "You're establishing that I'm off-limits to people like Klaus. That's a useful signal." "It's also possessive and patriarchal." "It's also effective." I turned to look at him. "I'm not offended. I understood what you were doing, but I appreciate you acknowledging the dynamic." He studied me for a long moment. "You're remarkably clear-eyed about this." "My grandmother warned me. You're positioning me as an asset and a protégé. Both of those require you to establish that I'm not available for other men to target or pursue. I'm fine with that arrangement as long as it's transparent. And if I told you it wasn't entirely strategic, his voice dropped, that watching him touch, you made me want to break his hand for reasons that had nothing to do with business. My pulse kicked up. Then I'd say we should probably discuss boundaries. We probably should, but he didn't move closer, didn't reach for me. The pearls look beautiful on you. Thank you for the strategic gift. That's not why I gave them to you. He held my gaze. I gave them to you because you looked at them in the jeweler's window when we passed it yesterday. For 2 seconds, you looked at them like they were something you wanted but would never buy for yourself. So I bought them for you. I stopped, unsure what it was. Impulsive, sentimental, neither of which are typical for me. He smiled without humor. You're complicating my decision-making process, Livia. Sorry. Don't be, I'm not. The car stopped at my building. We're going to Vienna next week, 4 days. Luca will handle the logistics. I got out, then leaned back in. Dante. Yes. Thank you for all of it, even the complicated parts. Especially the complicated parts, he said, and I carried those words up to my apartment like a secret I wasn't quite ready to examine. Vienna arrived wrapped in snow and Christmas markets that glowed against the December dark. We stayed in the Grand Hotel Wien, and Dante's suite connected to mine through a door that remained diplomatically closed. The meetings were with Austrian bankers and Czech developers, negotiations about concert halls and opera funding that required me to translate not just between German and Italian, but between artistic ambition and financial reality. Dante moved through these conversations like a conductor, orchestrating agreements through gesture and careful silence. On the third night, he invited me to the opera. It's not business, he said when I raised an eyebrow. It's cultural immersion. You need to understand this world to navigate it effectively. Very strategic. Entirely strategic, but his smile suggested otherwise. We sat in a private box for La Traviata, and I tried to focus on the stage instead of the way Dante's hand rested near mine on the velvet armrest. Tried not to notice the way he leaned close during the intervals to explain subtext I'd missed. You actually love this, I said during the second interval. My mother sang opera before she married my father. She never performed professionally, but she taught me to hear the architecture behind the emotion. He watched the stage below. It's like our work, all the structure hidden beneath beautiful surfaces. Is that what you think we do? Create beautiful surfaces? I think we create functional arrangements that let people maintain necessary fictions. He turned to look at me. Klaus Richter needs permits. We both know those permits require connections he doesn't have and payments that won't appear on any ledger. But if I introduce him to the right people at the right cultural events, if his company makes strategic donations to the right foundations, the permits appear. Everyone's hands stay clean. Except yours. My hands stopped being clean a long time ago. He said it without bitterness. But they're not bloody. That's a line I don't cross. What about the line between professional and personal? The question hung in the air between us. Below, the orchestra began tuning for the next act. That's a line I'm trying very hard to respect, he said quietly. Because you work for me, and that creates a power differential that makes honest consent complicated. But I'm finding it very difficult to maintain that respect when you look at me like that. Like what? Like you're trying to decide if I'm a good man who does questionable things, or a questionable man who does good things. Which are you? I don't know. His hand covered mine on the armrest, warm and careful. But I know I want to be good for you specifically. The lights dimmed. His hand remained on mine through the entire third act, and I let it stay because boundaries, I was learning, were easier to draw in theory than in practice. After the opera, We walked back to the hotel through streets that smelled like mulled wine and roasted chestnuts. Snow fell in soft flurries that caught in my hair. Question, Dante said, matching his stride to mine. Ask. Do you trust me? I thought about it seriously. I trust that you'll keep me safe. I trust that you'll honor your word about my grandmother's care. I trust that you operate by a code, even if I don't fully understand it yet. But do you trust me personally? I'm getting there. I stopped walking, turned to face him. Snow collected on his shoulders. I trust that what you feel is real, even if I'm not sure yet how it fits with the strategy. It doesn't fit. He reached up, brushed snow from my hair with gentle fingers. That's what makes it inconvenient. Inconvenient for who? Both of us. His hand lingered near my face. Because I'm trying to maintain professional distance, and you're making that impossible just by existing. I could quit. You could. His thumb traced my cheekbone. But you won't, because you're invested now in the work, in the learning, in the care your grandmother is receiving, and because you're curious about where this leads. He was right, and we both knew it. What do you want from me, Dante? Everything, he said it simply. But I'll settle for whatever you're willing to give, at whatever pace makes you comfortable. That's very reasonable. I'm a very reasonable man. His hand dropped. Also a patient one. When you're ready, if you're ready, you'll tell me. Until then, we maintain the boundaries. We walked the rest of the way in silence. At my door, he kissed my forehead, chaste, brotherly, absolutely maddening. Sleep well, Livia. I closed the door and leaned against it, pulse racing, and tried to convince myself that boundaries were good. That professional distance was smart. That falling for my employer was exactly the kind of mistake girls like me couldn't afford. But I was already falling, and we both knew it. The morning brought new complications in the form of a voicemail from Dr. Castellano. Nana's condition had shifted. Not a crisis, but a clear marker that we were moving into the final phase. I called Dante immediately. I need to go back to Milan. I'll have the plane ready in an hour. No questions, no hesitation. I'm coming with you. You have meetings. Luca can handle them. Your grandmother is more important. We flew back in silence. Dante worked on his laptop but kept glancing at me, as if checking that I hadn't dissolved. At the facility, Dr. Castellano met us with the careful compassion of someone who delivered this news too many times. She's comfortable, he explained in the hallway, but the trajectory is clear now. Weeks, not months. I'm so sorry. Nana was awake when I entered, and she smiled when she saw Dante behind me. You brought your young man, she said in Romansh. He's my employer, Nana. He's standing in the doorway like a worried boyfriend. She switched to Italian. Come in, Dante, I won't bite. He moved into the room with the careful respect he probably showed actual royalty. Signora Marcello, how are you feeling? Tired, old, honest. She studied him with clear eyes. You care for my granddaughter. Very much. Why? The directness made me wince, but Dante didn't flinch. Because she's brilliant and careful and sees through surfaces. Because she makes me want to be better than I am. Because when I'm with her, I remember why I started moving the organization toward legitimacy in the first place. And what do you want from her? Everything she's willing to give, nothing she's not. Nana nodded slowly. Your father made promises like that. He kept most of them. You have his eyes, you see 3 moves ahead. But do you see the cost? I do. Then be careful with her. She's stronger than she looks, but that strength has limits. Don't use it all up serving your purposes. I won't, he glanced at me. I'll wait outside. After he left, Nana reached for my hand. He's in love with you. Nana. I know love when I see it. Your grandfather looked at me that way when we were young, like I was both the question and the answer. She coughed, a wet rattle. The question is whether you love him back. It's complicated. Love is always complicated. The question is whether it's worth the complication. She squeezed my fingers. Your grandfather and old Dante did dark things during dark times, but they did them with honor in service of family. Young Dante is trying to climb out of that darkness. If you love him, you could be his light, but only if you maintain your own integrity. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Then get stronger, negotiate, set terms, make him see you as a partner, not a possession. Her eyes drifted closed. Love doesn't mean surrender, Miyakara, it means choosing your battles. I sat with her until she slept, then found Dante in the garden, smoking a cigarette he stubbed out immediately when he saw me. I didn't know you smoked. I quit 5 years ago, today required an exception. He studied my face. How is she? Tired clear, she says you love me. She's observant. He said it without defensiveness. Are you asking me to deny it? I'm asking what you want me to do about it. Nothing you don't want to do. He moved closer, stopping just short of touching. Livia, I know the power dynamic is complicated. I know I'm your employer and your grandmother's benefactor, and that creates pressure you shouldn't have to navigate. If you want me to keep this strictly professional until you're ready to quit and we can start over on equal terms, I will. And if I don't want to wait, then we set ground rules. You have veto power over everything. You can say no at any point and nothing changes about your employment or your grandmother's care. I don't touch you unless you give explicit permission. We move at your pace. He held my gaze. And if it doesn't work, if you decide this was a mistake, we go back to professional without penalty or punishment. You'd agree to all that? Yes, no hesitation, because the alternative is losing you entirely, and that's not acceptable. I thought about my grandmother's advice, about negotiating from strength, about choosing battles. Ground rules, I said. 1. My work performance is evaluated separately from anything personal. 2. I maintain my own apartment. 3. If I say stop, we stop. 4. We're honest with each other even when it's uncomfortable. Agreed, he smiled slowly. Can I add a fifth? What? When you're ready, you let me know. I'm not making the first move. That needs to be your choice. Deal. I held out my hand to shake on it. He took my hand and pulled me close instead, his mouth stopping just before it reached mine. These are good boundaries, Livia. I'm going to hate respecting them. Then I'll try not to make you wait too long. His breath caught, but he released me. We should get you back to the facility. In a minute, I stood on my toes and kissed him, brief, careful, a promise of things I wasn't quite ready to deliver. Thank you for flying back with me. Always, his hand cupped my face. Your family matters, that means something in my world. We flew back to Vienna that evening, and I spent the return trip watching him work. Watching the way he commanded rooms and negotiated terms and moved through the world like he owned pieces of it. Watching him become mine. The next month unfolded in a rhythm that felt almost sustainable. I worked, visited my grandmother, learned the invisible architecture of Dante's business. I met developers in Prague and bankers in Zurich, translated not just words but cultural assumptions. I watched Dante navigate power like a chess master, always 3 moves ahead. And slowly, carefully, we circled closer to each other. He touched my back when we entered rooms, stood close during elevators, found excuses to brush fingers when passing documents, never pushing, never demanding, always giving me space to retreat. I didn't retreat. Instead, I learned about the organization's history, about the legitimate fronts and the shadowy connections, about the rivals who wanted what Dante had and the allies who owed him favors, about the careful choreography required to operate between worlds. You're learning fast, Luca observed one morning in the car, faster than anyone expected. Is that a problem? It's unusual. Most people take years to understand the dynamics. You grasp them in weeks. He glanced at me. Signor Corvino is impressed. But you're not sure if that's good. I think you're good for him. He's different around you, more careful, more human. But that could be a liability in our world. Affection is weakness. Only if it's exploited. And our rivals would exploit it without hesitation. He pulled up to the facility. Just be careful, Signorina Marcello, for both your sakes. Inside, I found my grandmother having lunch with Dr. Castellano, both of them speaking Romansh and laughing about something I missed. She looked smaller every time I visited, but also somehow more present, as if comfort had given her permission to be fully herself. Livia, she smiled when she saw me. Come sit, we were discussing your young man. He's not my young man. No, Dr. Castellano raised an eyebrow. He's been calling me twice a week for updates. And yesterday, he sent over a case of wine from your family's region because I mentioned your grandmother missed it. I glanced at Nana, who shrugged. He's courting you by caring for me. It's very traditional. It's very strategic. It's both. She waved Dr. Castellano away with affectionate impatience. Give us a moment. When we were alone, she fixed me with a clear gaze. There's something I need to tell you about your grandfather and old Dante. You've hinted before. I've been vague because some stories don't belong in daylight, but you're in deep now and you need context, she sighed. Your grandfather moved money for old Dante during the 70s and 80s. Money from construction, from transport, from businesses that operated in shadows because the legitimate system excluded immigrants. Nothing violent, nothing that harmed innocents, but not strictly legal either. How much money? Enough that when your grandfather died, old Dante considered the debt canceled. He sent flowers to the funeral and made sure I had what I needed. Then, 5 years ago, young Dante found me in the city, asked if I needed anything. I told him I was fine. He said, when you're not, call this number. She gestured toward the comfortable room, the attentive care. This is that promise being kept. So I'm not really earning this. You're earning it by being valuable to him. But the offer existed before you proved your value. That's the difference. She reached for my hand. Your grandfather used to say that true power isn't taking, it's giving strategically. Dante is giving you education, position, access. Not out of pure altruism, but because he sees potential. Don't diminish that by thinking it's only debt. But it is partly debt. And partly attraction, and partly strategy, and partly genuine care. People contain multitudes, mia cara, especially powerful men. The question isn't whether his motives are pure. It's whether you can work with the reality of who he is. I thought about Dante, his careful boundaries, his strategic generosity, the way he looked at me like I was both a puzzle and a prize. I think I can, I said, but I need to know the whole truth, about the organization, about the dangers, about what I'm actually part of. Then ask him, tonight, demand full transparency, she smiled. And when he gives it to you, because he will decide if you can live with it. That evening, after dinner with a French wine distributor who was definitely laundering money through legitimate businesses, I told Dante I wanted to talk. He took me to his apartment, not the hotel suite, but his actual residence, a penthouse with art I recognized from auction catalogs and windows that turned the city into a painting. Full transparency, I said, everything I should know. He poured 2 glasses of wine and settled across from me. Ask your questions. The wine distributor, how much of that business is legitimate? 70%. The other 30% moves money for Russian and Eastern European clients who need to get capital out of their countries without triggering sanctions or scrutiny. And the hotel groups, 90% legitimate, 10% providing discreet accommodation for people who need to move through Europe without paper trails. The logistics companies, mostly legitimate. Some of the transport serves clients who prefer not to interact with customs officials. So you're running a parallel economy. I'm providing services that formal institutions refuse to provide for people who need them. Some of my clients are criminals. Some are political refugees. Some are businessmen operating in gray zones. I don't ask too many questions as long as they follow my rules. Which are: no drugs, no human trafficking, no violence against civilians, no exploitation of children. Break those rules and you're out permanently. He set down his glass. I've exiled 4 clients in the past 2 years for violations. One of them tried to retaliate. He's currently serving 8 years in a Polish prison. You got him arrested. I gave law enforcement evidence of his legitimate crimes. He thought my protection meant immunity. He was wrong. I absorbed this, so you're not exactly Robin Hood. No, I'm building wealth and power, but I'm doing it with rules and I'm transitioning toward legitimacy because the shadow economy is unsustainable long term. He leaned forward. In 10 years, I want the organization to be a normal multinational. Hotels, real estate, logistics, all clean, all taxed, all defensible. But I need this decade to move the pieces and neutralize the rivals who prefer the old system. Rivals like who? Like Luca Volpe, who runs a competing network and thinks I'm weak for moving legitimate. Like the Russian groups who want to expand into my territory. Like the regulatory agencies who'd love to use me as an example. His expression hardened. They're all threats, Livia. To me, to my people, to you. Have I been in danger this whole time? You've been protected this whole time. But yes, if someone wanted to hurt me, you'd be a logical target. He held my gaze. That's why you're always with me or Luca. Why the apartment has security you haven't noticed. Why I track your location whenever you're moving through the city. That's invasive. That's necessary. And if you want me to stop, I will. But then you'll need to carry security, and that comes with its own complications. I thought about Nana's advice, about negotiating from strength. I want to know where you are too, equal visibility. He smiled. Fair, I'll set it up. And I want to understand the legal exposure. If something goes wrong, what am I actually risking? Prosecution for money laundering, conspiracy, possibly racketeering depending on how creative the prosecutor feels. Realistically, if we were exposed tomorrow, I'd face 10 to 15 years. You'd face 3 to 5 as an accessory, assuming you cooperated. Which you would, because I'd instruct my lawyers to negotiate your immunity in exchange for testimony. You'd throw me to the wolves. I'd protect you by giving you a path out. Your testimony would be useless against me. You don't know enough operational detail, but it would satisfy prosecutors that you weren't complicit in the structure. He reached across, took my hand. I've built firewalls, Livia. If I go down alone. That's part of how I protect my people. That's very calculated. That's very necessary. People depend on me. That means I have to think through worst-case scenarios. He squeezed my fingers. Are you having second thoughts? I'm having all the thoughts. I looked at our joined hands. But no, I'm not walking away. I'm just making sure I understand the reality. The reality is that I'm in a dangerous business that I'm trying to make less dangerous. The reality is that I care about you in ways that complicate my decision-making. The reality is that I'd burn the entire organization to the ground before I let anything happen to you. He said it simply, like he was describing the weather. Does that help? It scares me. Good, fear is appropriate. Just don't let it paralyze you. I finished my wine and stood. Thank you for being honest. Always, he walked me to the door. Livia. Yes. The offer to walk away still stands. At any time. No penalty, no consequences. Noted, I kissed his cheek, but I'm not going anywhere. His hand caught my waist, pulled me flush against him. You're sure? I'm terrified and invested and probably making a mistake. I looked up at him. But yes, I'm sure. This time when he kissed me, it wasn't careful or brief. It was hungry and claiming and tasted like wine and risk. His hands framed my face like I was precious, like I was dangerous, like I was exactly what he'd been trying not to want. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "Ground rules," I said shakily. "I need to maintain some boundaries." "We have boundaries." His thumb traced my lower lip. "I'm respecting them right now by letting you leave." "Dante." "Go, Livia. Before I ask you to stay and we cross lines we haven't properly negotiated." I went, but I looked back from the elevator and found him still standing in the doorway, watching me with an expression that promised complicated things. The threat arrived wrapped in bureaucracy. A week later, Luca called me mid-morning. "Don't go to the office. Meet us at the alternate location." "What's wrong?" "Financial police raided 3 of our properties this morning. They're looking for documentation related to the Swiss deals. It's Volp. He's using law enforcement as a weapon." The alternate location turned out to be a law office in a deliberately boring building. Dante sat in a conference room surrounded by documents and lawyers who looked expensive and competent. "How bad?" I asked. "Manageable if we're careful." He gestured to a chair. "Volp convinced a prosecutor that our restructuring deals constitute money laundering. He's wrong. Everything we did has legal justification, but defending it will be expensive and public." "What do you need from me?" "Translation of all the Swiss documents, preparation of context memos explaining the legitimate business rationale, possibly testimony if it gets to trial." He studied me. "This is your chance to walk away clean. If you resign now, claim you were a naive employee, you'll have no exposure." "Are you firing me?" "I'm giving you an exit." "I don't want an exit, I want to help you fight this." I met his gaze. "What do you actually need?" Something in his expression shifted, relief maybe or something deeper. "Luca, clear the room." The lawyers filed out. When we were alone, Dante moved to the window. "Volp isn't just attacking the business. He's attacking you. The prosecutor has photos of us together, evidence of the apartment, records of your grandmother's care. He's building a narrative that you're my kept woman, not my employee. That the whole translator position is a fiction to hide the relationship." "Is he wrong?" "He's not entirely wrong. The position is real, but my motivation for creating it was personal as much as professional." He turned. "If this goes to trial, they'll put you on the stand. They'll imply you're a prostitute. They'll use your grandmother's illness to suggest you were coerced. They'll destroy your reputation to undermine my credibility." "Let them try." "Livia." "I'm not leaving." I stood, cross to him. "If you think I'm walking away because some prosecutor wants to slut-shame me, you don't know me as well as you think you do. I chose this. I choose you, and I can handle whatever comes." He pulled me against him, face buried in my hair. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most foolish." "Both." I held him tight. "What's the actual plan?" "We demonstrate that every transaction has legitimate documentation. We show that you're a genuine employee with real responsibilities. We prove that Volp is using law enforcement to settle business grievances." He pulled back. "And we prepare to relocate you and your grandmother if things go badly." "Relocate where?" "I have a property in the Alps. Remote, secure, comfortable. If the prosecutor decides to arrest you as leverage against me, we move both of you there while the lawyers handle it." "That sounds like witness protection." "That sounds like protection, period." His hands framed my face. "I won't let them use you against me, Livia. If that means disappearing you until this is resolved, that's what we'll do." "And my life, my degree?" "Transferred. You finish remotely, graduate with credentials from a better university than the one you're attending. I've already made the arrangements." He kissed my forehead. "I told you, I think 3 moves ahead. You're my weakness, which means you're also my highest priority to protect." The word weakness settled in my chest like a stone. Is that what I am? You're the person who makes me reconsider every risk calculation. The person who makes me want things I'd written off as impossible. The person who stands between me and becoming what my father was. His thumb traced my cheekbone. So yes, you're my weakness. But you're also my conscience and my future and the reason I'm fighting so hard to move legitimate. That's a lot of pressure. Then share the load with me. He rested his forehead against mine. Be my partner, not just my employee. Help me build something worth leaving behind. Define partner. Equal say in decisions that affect both of us. Transparency about risks and opportunities. Legal protections for your interests separate from mine. And he paused. Eventually, if you want it, marriage. Because I'm traditional enough to want to make this official. You're proposing. I'm stating intention. The proposal comes later when we're not in crisis mode and you can say yes without duress. He smiled. I'm strategic, not romantic. You're both, I kissed him slow and deep. Okay. Okay to what? To partnership, to staying, to figuring this out together. I pulled back. But Dante, if we're partners, I need full visibility. No more surprises about security or contingencies. We decide together. Agreed. He kissed me once more, then released me. Now let's get back to work. Those documents won't translate themselves. The next week blurred into 16-hour days of document review and legal strategy. I translated contracts, wrote context memos, prepared for potential testimony. Dante worked alongside me, methodical and tireless. At night, we'd collapse in his apartment, too tired for anything but proximity. He'd pull me against him on the sofa, and we'd sit in comfortable silence while the city glittered below. Tell me something true, I said one night. About what? About you, something I don't know. He thought for a moment. I play piano, taught myself when I was 14 because my mother missed the opera and I thought if I could play for her, she'd be less sad. I'm not very good, but I still practice. Show me. He led me to a room I hadn't noticed, small, spare, containing only a piano and a window. He sat, pulled me down beside him, and played something melancholy and beautiful that I half recognized from one of our Vienna nights. Verdi, I murmured. From La Traviata, the piece that plays during the final scene. His hands moved over the keys with surprising grace. My mother said all the great romances end in loss, that love requires sacrifice. Cheerful woman. Realistic woman. He stopped playing, turned to face me. I don't want our story to end in sacrifice. I want to build something that lasts. Then we make it last. I leaned against him. We're building it together. He resumed playing, and I closed my eyes and let the music wash over me. Outside, Milan hummed with commerce and crime and 1,000 small dramas. Inside, we created temporary sanctuary. For now, it was enough. The gallery opening was supposed to be neutral ground, a cultural event where business associates could meet without the tension of formal negotiation. Dante had been invited by a collector who straddled legitimate and shadow economies, and he'd asked me to accompany him. You'll enjoy it, he'd said. The art is actually good, and you need to understand how these social events function. I wore a dress that cost more than my first car and the pearls that had become my signature. Dante wore tailored black and competence, and together we looked like people who belonged among the champagne and six-figure paintings. The collector, an Italian count with family money and flexible ethics, greeted us warmly. Dante, you brought your brilliant translator. Livia, I've heard such good things about your work. Thank you. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server. We moved through the gallery, and Dante surprised me by actually engaging with the art. Not performing culture, but genuinely responding to it. He paused in front of a stark black and white photograph of an empty street. This is what I'm trying to leave behind, he said quietly. The isolation, the shadows. And move toward what? This. He gestured to a painting across the room, vibrant colors, people gathered around a table, warmth and connection rendered in oils. Community, legitimacy, legacy. You're more romantic than you pretend. Only with you. He touched my back, that gesture I'd learned meant both protection and possession. Only recently. We were studying a sculpture when I felt a tension shift in the room. Dante's posture changed microscopically, alert, ready. "Volpe," he murmured, "don't react." The man who approached looked like someone had commissioned a portrait of wealth and disappointed the artist. Expensive suit that didn't quite fit, smile that promised knives. He nodded to Dante with false courtesy. "Corvino, Signorina, enjoying the art." "We are." Dante's voice carried the boredom of someone swatting a fly. "You." "Very much, though I'm surprised you have time for culture given recent complications with law enforcement." Volpe's gaze slid to me. "Perhaps you're here to establish alibis. Very forward-thinking. Perhaps you're here because you think public settings prevent me from addressing your violation of professional courtesy." Dante smiled without warmth. "But we both know I don't need privacy to make a point." "Is that a threat?" "It's an observation. You involved institutions in a private dispute. That was unwise." "What was unwise was thinking you could transition to legitimacy without consequence." Volpe gestured around the gallery. "This world doesn't want people like us, Dante. They tolerate us when we stay in shadows, but the moment we try to join them legitimately, they call the police." "That's your experience, not mine." "Not yet, but give it time." Volpe glanced at me again. "I hear your grandmother is quite comfortable in her private facility. Expensive care for a woman whose medical needs can't possibly justify the cost, almost like it's payment for services rendered." I felt Dante go still beside me, the dangerous stillness of a predator choosing between fight and patience. "Careful," Dante said softly. "Of what?" "I'm simply observing that Signorina Marcello is remarkably well compensated for translation work. Some might say suspiciously well compensated. Some might say many things. Smart people keep those observations private." "Smart people prepare for change," Volpe smiled. "The prosecutor is very interested in compensation structures, in relationships that blur professional and personal lines, in young women whose sick relatives receive care that seems disproportionate." I kept my voice level. "Signor Volpe, your implications are tiresome and actionable. If you have concerns about my compensation, I suggest you take them up with employment authorities, who will find everything properly documented. If you have concerns about my relationship with Dante, I suggest you examine why you're so invested in other people's personal lives. And if you think threatening my grandmother is strategic," I smiled without humor, "then you've badly misread this situation." Volpe blinked, clearly not expecting me to engage. "I wasn't threatening." "You were," clumsily, "because you think making this personal gives you leverage." I stepped closer to him, ignoring Dante's hand at my back. "But all you've done is demonstrate that you're willing to target civilians. That makes you dangerous. More importantly, it makes you the kind of man who violates the rules Dante operates by, and that makes you vulnerable." "Is that a threat?" "It's an observation." I threw his words back at him. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we'd like to enjoy the art." I turned and walked away, trusting Dante to follow. My hands were shaking with adrenaline, but I kept my pace steady until we reached the far end of the gallery. "That was either brilliant or suicidal," Dante murmured when we were alone. He was testing boundaries. I enforced them. By threatening him. By clarifying stakes. I met his gaze. "I'm tired of being treated like a pawn. If Volpe wants to play games with my grandmother's safety, he needs to understand there are consequences." "There are, but they flow through me, not you." "We're partners. That means I defend us too." Something in his expression shifted, pride maybe or concern I couldn't quite read. "You're remarkable, also reckless." "I learned from the best." He was about to respond when I saw it, the shift in the room's energy. Security moving purposefully. Guests being subtly herded toward exits. The collector approaching Dante with urgency barely concealed. "Financial police," he said quietly. "Anonymous tip about illicit business deals being conducted at a cultural event. You need to leave. Now." "Volp," I said. "Definitely Volp." Dante's hand found mine. "Livia, there's a service exit through the back gallery. Luca is already there with the car." "What about you?" "I'll leave separately. We don't need photographs of us fleeing together." He squeezed my fingers. "Go, I'll meet you at the alternate location." "Dante." "Trust me, go." I went, following the collector through rooms that grew progressively less polished, until we emerged in an alley where Luca waited with a car already running. "Get in," he said. "We need to move before they secure the perimeter." We drove through back streets, Luca's phone ringing constantly with updates. The financial police were interviewing guests, checking IDs, looking for Dante specifically. "He'll be fine," Luca said, reading my expression in the mirror. "He knows how to handle official inquiries, but Signorina, they were looking for you too." "For me?" "The tip included your name, allegations that you're involved in money laundering under the guise of translation work." He met my eyes in the mirror. "Volp is escalating. He's trying to force Dante's hand by threatening you directly." My phone buzzed. "Dante, I'm fine. En route to the safe location. Luca will bring you to the Alps. Your grandmother is already being transported. Pack nothing, everything you need is already there." I typed back, "This is happening fast." His response, "Volp gave us no choice. I'm protecting you, trust me." I trusted him, but I also felt the net closing, felt the careful life we'd been building shift into something more urgent and dangerous. "How long will we be in the Alps?" "As long as it takes." Luca navigated onto a highway heading north. "Days, maybe weeks, until the lawyers manage the situation and Signor Corvino neutralizes the threat." "Neutralizes how?" "However is necessary." Luca's voice was carefully neutral. "He's very protective of his people. Volp miscalculated by making this personal." We drove through the night, and I watched Milan disappear behind us. Watched the life I'd been building recede into uncertainty. Somewhere ahead, Dante was arranging pieces, protecting me, being the strategic mastermind who thought 3 moves ahead. But I was tired of being protected. I was ready to become dangerous myself. The Alpine house perched on a mountainside like something from a fairy tale, stone and timber and windows that framed impossible views. Inside, it was warm and modern, with security I could feel but not see. Nana was already settled in a ground-floor suite, Dr. Castellano at her bedside. "How is she?" I asked. "Comfortable. The transport was managed well. Signor Corvino arranged a medical helicopter." He smiled gently. "Your young man is very thorough." "He's very something." I moved to my grandmother's side. She was sleeping, her breathing shallow but steady. "She insisted on coming," Dr. Castellano explained. "Said she wanted to see how the story ends." Dante arrived an hour later, snow dusting his shoulders. He found me on the terrace, watching dusk paint the mountains purple. "You're angry," he said. "I'm processing." I didn't turn around. "You moved my entire life in 6 hours." "I protected your life in 6 hours. There's a difference." "You made decisions for me." "I made decisions for us, as your partner." He moved beside me, careful not to touch. "Volp was going to have you arrested tonight. I had intelligence that he'd bribed a prosecutor to issue a warrant. If you'd stayed in Milan, you'd be in custody right now, being used as leverage to force my cooperation. So instead I'm in a beautiful prison. You're in a strategic location until the threat is neutralized." His voice carried an edge I rarely heard. "I'm sorry it happened this way, but I won't apologize for keeping you safe." I finally looked at him. He looked tired, the kind of tired that suggested decisions made in crisis with no good options. How are you going to neutralize Volp? Carefully, legally, without crossing lines that can't be uncrossed. That's not an answer. It's the answer you're getting tonight, he sighed. Livia, I know this feels like control, but it's necessity. Volp is willing to use institutions as weapons. I'm not. That limits my options. Then expand your options. Include me in the strategy instead of just moving me around the board. His expression shifted, acknowledgement maybe or respect. Fair, come inside, we'll brief you on the full situation. The briefing took place in what Dante called the study, leather chairs, a fireplace, maps and documents spread across a table. Luca was there, along with two lawyers whose names I immediately forgot. Current situation, Dante began. Volp has convinced a prosecutor that our Swiss restructuring deals constitute money laundering. He's provided selectively edited documentation that makes legitimate transactions look suspicious. He's also built a case that Livia is involved, either as a participant or as coerced assistance. Neither of which is true, one of the lawyers said. Truth is irrelevant if we can't control the narrative. Dante pulled up photographs on a laptop. These are photos from the gallery. Volp's people were documenting us together, building evidence of a relationship that undermines her credibility as a professional employee. So we what? I asked. Hide here while he destroys your reputation. We buy time while we build our counterattack. Dante clicked to another image, financial records. Volp has exposure we've been documenting for months. Transactions that violate his agreements with the Russians. Relationships with Polish crime families he's supposed to avoid. We've been compiling evidence. To do what with? To give to law enforcement, not the prosecutor Volp bribed, but federal investigators who have been looking at him for years. Dante's smile was sharp. We don't fight institutions, we use them. That's going to take time, Luca observed. We have time. Livia and her grandmother are secure. The prosecutor can't move without knowing where they are. Meanwhile, Dante gestured to one of the lawyers. We're filing a complaint about prosecutorial misconduct. The gallery tip was obviously coordinated with Volp. We have proof that money changed hands. How long will all this take? Weeks, maybe months. Dante met my gaze. I know that's not the answer you want, but this is chess, not checkers. We move carefully. I studied the documents, the photographs, the careful evidence of a war being waged through institutions and legal frameworks. It was civilized, bloodless, absolutely ruthless. What do you need from me? Right now, nothing. Stay safe, be patient. He glanced at the others. Can we have the room? They filed out, leaving us alone with the fire and the weight of complicated choices. I meant what I said, Dante began. About partnership. I should have consulted you before moving your grandmother. You should have. I moved to the window, watched snow begin to fall. But I understand why you didn't. Time pressure, crisis. The need to act decisively. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it human. I turned to face him. I'm not angry you protected me. I'm angry I had to be protected, that I'm vulnerable because of my connection to you. I'm sorry for that, for making you a target. Don't be, I chose this. I crossed to him, took his hands. But Dante, when this is over, when Volp is neutralized and we can return to Milan, things need to change. How? I need real authority, not just as your translator or your partner, but as someone with actual power in the organization. Someone rivals will think twice about targeting. His eyes searched mine. You want operational involvement. I want to be valuable enough that hurting me costs more than it's worth. I want to be dangerous in my own right, not just dangerous as your weakness. A slow smile spread across his face. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about a lot of things. I pulled him closer, including how much I love you, and how frustrating it is that I can't do anything about it while we're in crisis mode. Crisis mode could last weeks. Then we'll be very frustrated. I kissed him, slow and deliberate. But when this is over, when we're safe and back in Milan and Volpe is no longer a threat, we're having a very different conversation. About what? About what partnership actually means. About marriage and authority and building something that lasts. About all the things we've been circling but haven't actually claimed. His hands framed my face. I love you too, just so that's clear. It's clear. Now let me go check on my grandmother before I do something that violates our ground rules. Those ground rules are getting very inconvenient. Good, I pulled away, smiling. Anticipation builds character. I left him standing by the fire and went to sit with Nana while snow buried the world outside. My grandmother's final weeks unfolded with the strange, slow-fast quality of endings. Days felt long, yet time telescoped. She was lucid more often than not, holding court from her comfortable bed while Dr. Castellano managed pain without erasing her presence. Dante visited daily, sitting with her when I needed to walk or work or simply breathe. One afternoon, I found them speaking Romansh, or rather, she was speaking and he was attempting to follow. "Your father spoke it better," she was saying. "My father had more practice. He worked in Graubünden during the winters. Moving money my husband helped hide," she said it matter-of-factly. "They were good at what they did, quiet, careful, honorable in their way." Was my father happy? She considered. He was satisfied. He built something that protected his family and provided for his community. That was enough for men of his generation. Her gaze shifted to me in the doorway. "Your generation wants more. You want legitimate and meaningful. That's harder to achieve." Dante stood when he saw me. "I'll give you two privacy." "Stay," Nana gestured weakly. "This involves you both." We sat on either side of her bed, and she took each of our hands. "I'm dying," she said simply. "We all know it. Days now, not weeks. I want to say things while I can still say them clearly." "Nana." "Hush, listen." She squeezed my fingers. "Livia, you've been given an extraordinary opportunity, not just through Dante's resources but through your own intelligence and courage. Don't waste it trying to be safe, be dangerous, be powerful, build something worth leaving behind." "I'm trying." "Try harder. The world doesn't give women power, we take it." She turned to Dante. "And you love her, that's clear, but love isn't enough. You need to give her real authority. Make her your partner in fact, not just in name." "I'm working on that." "Work faster." Volpe targeted her because she's valuable but vulnerable. Make her invulnerable. Give her her own power base. "That's the plan." "Good." She closed her eyes, gathering strength. "Your father's built a network that survived because it served communities institutions failed. You're transforming that network into something legitimate. That's good work. But remember, legitimacy isn't the same as morality. Stay moral even when the law is unjust." "We will." "See that you do." She opened her eyes again. "Now, have you proposed yet?" Dante actually looked sheepish. "Not officially." "Why not?" "Timing, context, the small matter of a rival trying to destroy everything I've built." "Excuses." She fixed him with a surprisingly sharp gaze. "Propose properly, with a ring and planning and all the traditional nonsense. She deserves that." "Yes, ma'am." "And Livia, say yes. He's flawed and dangerous and operates in moral gray zones. But he's also intelligent and loyal and loves you enough to build a better world because you exist in it. That's rare." "I know." "Then act like you know. Choose him fully. Choose this life. Stop holding back pieces of yourself in case it doesn't work." "I'm not." "You are. You're protecting yourself. Stop it. If you're going to be dangerous all the way." She drifted off after that, exhausted by the effort of truth-telling. Dante and I sat in silence, holding her hands, while snow continued to fall outside. "She's right," I said eventually. "About what?" "I'm holding back, protecting myself." "That's human. It's also limiting." I looked at him across my grandmother's sleeping form. "When this is over, I want to be all in, no reservations, full partnership. And if we fail, if Volp wins or the prosecutors decide to move against us anyway, then we fail together," I smiled. "That was always the risk." "That's very romantic." "I have hidden depths. I'm starting to notice." 2 days later, my grandmother slipped into unconsciousness. Dr. Castellano increased the morphine, made her comfortable, explained gently that this was the expected progression. I sat with her through the night, holding her hand, speaking Romanche into the darkness, telling her about Dante, about the organization, about the future I was planning. She died just before dawn, with snow falling outside and the mountains turning pink with sunrise. Dante found me still holding her hand an hour later. He didn't say anything, just sat beside me and let me cry against his shoulder. The funeral was small. Dr. Castellano, Luca, a priest Dante had arranged who spoke Romanche. We buried her in the village cemetery with views of the mountains she'd carried in memory. Standing at her grave, I felt something shift in me. The last anchor to my old life, to the girl I'd been before delivery bags and desperation, was gone. What remained was choice. That night, I found Dante in the study, working on documents related to the Volp situation. "Progress?" I asked. "Movement." He set down his pen. "The federal investigators are interested in our evidence. They're opening a formal inquiry into Volp's operations." "How long until they act?" "Months probably. These things move slowly." "Too slowly." I sat across from him. "I've been thinking we're being reactive, defending, responding to Volp's moves. That's the nature of this kind of conflict. Or we make him react to us." I pulled out my phone, showed him notes I'd been making. "His exposure is financial, right? Transactions with the Russians that violate his agreements." "Yes." "Then we don't just give that information to investigators. We leak it to his Russian partners, make them think he's cooperating with law enforcement, create distrust." Dante's expression shifted: interest, calculation. "That's aggressive." "That's effective. If his partners think he's compromised, they cut him off. Without their backing, his operation loses funding and protection. That makes him vulnerable. It also might make him desperate enough to do something violent. So we control the narrative. We make it clear the leak came from somewhere else. We're not on his radar as the source." Dante stood, paced to the window. "You've thought this through." "I learned from the best." I joined him. "My grandmother said to be dangerous all the way. This is me being dangerous." "It's also you being brilliant." He turned to face me, "and slightly terrifying." "Good. I'm tired of being the vulnerable one." "You were never vulnerable. You've always been the most dangerous person in the room. I just protected you enough that others didn't notice." "Then stop protecting me and start amplifying me." He pulled me close, rested his forehead against mine. "Partners." "Partners," I confirmed. "Now about that proposal my grandmother mentioned. You want me to propose in an Alpine safe house while we're orchestrating the destruction of a rival. I want you to propose when it feels right. I just want to know it's coming." "It's coming." His hands framed my face. "When we return to Milan, when Volp is neutralized and your grandmother's estate is settled and we have time to breathe. I'm doing it properly, ring, planning, all the traditional nonsense. I'm holding you to that." "Good." He kissed me, soft and promising. "Because I'm done holding back too. When we return, everything changes." The leak to Volp's Russian partners happened through carefully constructed anonymity, a tip to a journalist known for investigating organized crime, documents suggesting Volp was cooperating with authorities. photos that looked like surveillance but were actually strategically edited. Within a week, the Russians cut contact. Within 2 weeks, Volp's financial backing evaporated. Within 3 weeks, he was desperate enough to make mistakes. The federal investigators noticed those mistakes, documented them, built a case that had nothing to do with Dante but everything to do with Volp's violation of interstate and international agreements. "He's going down," Luca reported during a strategy session. "Not for what he did to us, but for what he was doing all along. The investigation will take months, but the outcome is clear." "And our exposure?" I asked. "Minimal. The prosecutor who was working with him has been reassigned pending ethics review. The financial police investigation into Signor Corvino's operations has been closed for lack of evidence." Luca smiled slightly. "You're both clear." "Then we can go home," Dante said. "You can go home." We returned to Milan in early spring. The city had thawed while we were gone, and I felt like I was seeing it clearly for the first time, not as a place that had failed me, but as a place I could shape. Dante kept his promise about the proposal. He took me to the Palazzo Esterno on a night he'd reserved the entire building. The same lounge where I'd delivered risotto 6 months earlier had been transformed. Candles, flowers, the city glittering beyond the windows. "This is where it started," he said. "You, invisible, me, watching. Both of us pretending we weren't about to change each other's lives. You were very confident. I was very strategic. There's a difference." He took my hands. "But this isn't strategy. This is want and choice and all the complicated things we've been building toward." He produced a ring, simple, elegant, a single stone that caught the light like captured fire. "Livia Marcello, will you marry me? Will you be my partner in building something legitimate and meaningful? Will you help me leave behind something better than we inherited?" "Yes," I said, and meant it completely, to all of it. He slid the ring onto my finger, and we stood in the space where we'd begun, transformed from what we'd been into what we were becoming. "One condition," I said. "Name it." "I want real operational authority, a position in the organization that's mine, not just reflected through you. I want my own power base." "Done. You'll be CFO. You'll manage the restructuring and the transition to legitimacy. You'll have budget authority and final say on financial strategy." "That's more than I expected." "You earned more than you expected." He pulled me close. "You're not my translator anymore, Livia. You're my partner. Act like it." We married in June, in a ceremony that combined Romansh tradition with the careful observation of everyone who mattered in Dante's world. It was both celebration and signal. I was no longer the vulnerable girlfriend. I was the partner who helped orchestrate Volp's downfall. The first year of marriage was consumed by work. I restructured the organization's financial operations, created legitimate corporate structures, moved money out of shadows and into defensive positions. I learned that power wasn't given, it was demonstrated. That respect came from competence and strategic thinking. I became dangerous in my own right. 5 years later, I stood in an office that bore my name. Livia Marcello Corvino, Chief Financial Officer. The organization was 95% legitimate. Hotels, logistics, real estate, all properly taxed and documented. The remaining 5% was information brokerage, perfectly legal if ethically flexible. Dante and I ran it together, partners in reality, not just in name. Sometimes, late at night in our apartment, the same apartment he'd given me that first week, he'd ask if I regretted the choice. Never, I'd say truthfully, I regret nothing. Not even the moral gray zones. Especially not those, there where interesting things happen. You've become very comfortable with ambiguity. I learned from the best. We'd built something worth leaving behind. Not perfect, not purely legitimate, but honest in its complexity and strategic in its compassion. And on cold nights when snow fell on Milan, I'd remember my grandmother's words, "Be dangerous all the way." I was. We were. And the city that once kept me invisible now knew my name.